which is an approach that businesses often use to innovate and find new products and solutions. But really, the underlying purpose of design thinking is to solve problems. And today we're confronting a very new challenge, a big problem, and how can we apply this? And for those of us who are working or maybe want to apply it in different areas of our lives, how can we use design thinking to find a way forward in a period where we don't quite know what's coming next? And then I'll let Paula introduce herself now too.
Yes, thank you, Christina, and welcome everybody. We have another people that is joining us right now. And yes, my name is Paola De Vecchi Galbiati. I'm an innovation manager. I'm expert, let me say, in the design of organization. I help company to change and readapt the internal organization to the external input and external changes. Of course, you can imagine that in this period of coronavirus, I have working very hard in organizing smart working for some customer and for others to start to change the perspective of product and services. And I'm happy to stay here. And right now we can share with you all these design thinking canvases approach that we have con Cristina designing for approaching this crisis.
Great, thanks, Paula. So just, let's see if I can get my screen working. There we go. So today, just a brief agenda. We've got, first of all, a little bit of background on what design thinking is. Some of you, I think, already have some familiarity with it, and for others, it might be very new. So we're going, but in any case, we'll go over what it is and also why it's important now, how it can be particularly useful for us in this period with so many unknowns and so many things changing and a lot of complexities to manage. And so what we're going to do is, if you look at design thinking online, you'll probably see a number. It's usually there's usually a number of phases. We've boiled it down to 4 phases, and we've created a canvas that you can actually work on and fill out and answer some questions to help develop a resilience plan to move forward for whatever challenges you're confronting now. And what we're starting on today, and we'll do later on in this session, is the understanding phase and what's included in that and how we can understand our context better so eventually we can develop a solution to whatever challenge we're facing. Let's see here. So Simon Sinek, I've got a couple of quotes from him to talk about. He has some good examples of what's going on now, and I'll just read them quickly to you. These are not unprecedented times. There are many cases, lists of cases, where change or something unexpected has put many companies out of business and made many other companies come out stronger and reinvent themselves. The opportunity is, what will we be? Not how will we preserve what we had. If you think you're going to do the same job and you're waiting, that ship has sailed. Nothing sparks innovation like a crisis. I think this is an opportunity. Instead of doubling down on old business models and panicking, how can we bring our cause to life? How can we bring about an infinite mindset? An infinite mindset is any mindset that is ahead of the curve. This is a test on our empathy. So these quotes are especially appropriate now, and I wanted to touch on this point of empathy. And when we talk about empathy, this is a very strong value in the design thinking approach. And it's not simply empathy in the sense that, yeah, I feel bad for you, or that sucks, or that's tough. It's really much more proactive empathy. And it's really, it's necessary that we bring out our inner 2-year-old and bring out a lot of curiosity and ask questions, observe, watch what's going on, paying attention and immersing ourselves in the situation of our clients, of our employees, of our colleagues, whomever we are solving a problem for, and really really be proactive and ask the questions so we can gain a deeper understanding of what they're going through. Because once we understand these needs and we really cultivate this empathy, then we set ourselves a strong foundation for developing the right solutions, which comes a little bit later. Paula?
Yes, exactly. Another sentence that I like of this part of Simon Sinek thought is, nothing sparks innovation like a crisis. Because when the situation is happy, we are in our comfort zone and we want change anything. Right now, it is only during the crisis that we need to change something, to change our work, to change our results, product or services. And this is a very important point. Only during a crisis we can spark innovation. I agree completely.
Yeah, I mean that I think we can probably all think of examples. There are a lot of times when we've wanted to change, maybe when we've wanted to lose those extra pounds, or we wanted to try something new, but sometimes the carrot is not a strong enough motivator, and that stick is a bigger motivation force. And right now, like it or not, we're being forced to do things, and I see, and probably I think you can also think of examples where in your environment, many things that have been discussed are now being pushed forward much more quickly because there was never the time or never enough motivation to do it before, but now people are being forced to change, and hopefully we want to learn how to take advantage and change for the better and improve things, rather than just, as he said, sort of panicking and hoping for the best, where we can take action for that. So a question that you can either respond to verbally or in chat, sort of big picture, what is the biggest challenge you see today in this moment? And maybe it's a challenge of just, managing life at home and work, or something new, but it'd be great if any of you would like to share what you're seeing the biggest challenges. I mean, I'll say, until this weekend, I had been pretty much stuck in my house for 3 months. So my biggest challenge was just getting out the door. Now I'm able to do that, but it's still not as easy as I'd like it to be.
Sorry, Christina. Fiona is asking, challenge for the world or for me personally?
Let's say you personally. Thanks, because I lost my chat window.
Yes, because this question is related to you from two perspectives, if you want, the personal point of view and the professional point of view. But it's related to you, and we are very curious to know your answer about that, because we are also living in different parts of the world, and maybe you have a different perspective of your biggest challenge today. But I don't know.
Does anyone want to? Paula, how about you? What's your biggest challenge?
Oh, my biggest challenge today is to convince in my customer and also my friends to reopen their the business, their offices, and understand that this coronavirus is an opportunity to review the relationship between the companies, the customer, and we have to rethink to the sustainability and the importance of the let me say, to reuse, recycle the product instead to consume, for instance, a lot of plastics. Right now, I don't know in the other country, but right now in Italy, we are using a lot of plastics for the glove, for the mask, for the cover that we have to protect, and we have lose all the problem that we have with our heart. This is my biggest challenge today.
That's a good point. We've switched one challenge for another, sustainability for security. And then we see Nicole responded. Now she's transitioning from one company to another after a period of time. And especially in this, it's probably challenging at any moment, but in this period, yeah, I can imagine that's you have an extra challenge with that.
We have received a lot of messages. I don't know if you, Christina, if you have the chat open.
Yeah, I could. Well, yeah, now I see one from Dylan.
Nicole, for instance, transition from our company to another after almost 5 years. Or Dylan, identifying what I actually want to do now with my life. I left my long-term job. This is a very big change period, I think, not only for the coronavirus, but we are discussing all our relationship with the job, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a couple some transitions. And then Michelle is that's interesting. I like Michelle's perspective. You know, this pace has changed, and that's true. And so, what's going to happen when it's all slowed down, and then probably it's going to pick up again. So, interesting answers, and what nice. You know, it's comforting to know what other people are going through, even if it's not always easy.
Also, sorry, Fiona said an interesting point. Personally, exhaustion, picking up the pieces where society is not functional, home, schooling 2 kids, working full time, and studies too.
Oh gosh, that's a full plate.
Exactly.
Well, hopefully with these challenges, design thinking can help you sort through these. Moving on, what exactly is design thinking? And for one thing, it's not about looking backwards. And this is a sort of a default behavior of many. Because it's within our comfort zone. It's what we're used to, and sometimes it's because we've gotten so good and we're seeing so much success in doing things a certain way that we tend to look back and repeat that. And I don't want to say that you have to change everything or forget your past successes or eliminate all that you've done before, but you don't only want to do that. And you want to examine that with design thinking and make sure that what you're doing is still relevant and the most important approach that you can take today. Especially for those of us in Italy, this is an extra big challenge. And Italy has so much wonderful past and history, but there's a real resistance to change because there's a risk, there's a fear of failing. But now, as we've talked about, we're being forced to change. And one more point I want to add to this, not looking back, is the importance of data. Big data is very important. It's important to look at the data we have and analyze that. But remember, data is something that has happened before. So what we want to be able to do is examine the data in a new way, see if we can gather new insights, see what information is missing and add to that, not simply look at that. Paula, anything you want to add?
I agree with you. This point related to the big data, to the information, is very important. In the past, you can remember that when I have to do, for instance, the forecast of the sales, I use the past information and maybe I add, oh, okay, I will sell more 10% or more than 20% in the past year. And we, with a monolith, we produce data from 1 year to the other. Right now, thanks to the big data and machine learning, we can disrupt the information and use also the old data, combining in a different way this information and pointing out other information. In this way, we can that we can use the past information, but we have to change completely the perspective of the analysis of data. And of course, I'm Italian and I know my country, and it's true. We have a very cumbersome past, and because this, we have a very big difficulties to go and to see the future, because it's very strong link to our past. But we have to change very rapidly this approach.
Yeah. So if it's not about looking back, it's really about looking forward. And design thinking gives us the tools to help us look even when the future is known. And so even though we might not be able to know the future, what design thinking allows us to do is understand the needs. And if we can understand the needs, then we can plan our future and solve our problems with more success. So really, it's a forward-looking approach. And it doesn't give us, it requires us to be a little bit flexible and adjust our path, but it gives us guidelines on how to move along that path rather than setting a fixed goal. So as I had mentioned earlier, if you look online, you'll find lots of information on design thinking. There's graphics, there's a lot of great articles and content out there. For our purposes, we've divided it into 4 basic sections, of which we will have 4 interactive canvases to work on and help make a plan to move forward in whatever challenge you are facing. We want to start with this understanding phase, and this is where we're talking about first understanding ourselves and what it is we want to achieve and what the needs of our business are. Then we want to look at the needs of our client. And when I use the term client, I mean the person we're solving the problem for. So if your client is not a client in a traditional sense, maybe it's somebody, and maybe it's a colleague, maybe it's an employee, maybe it's a potential client, maybe it's somebody, maybe it's your own project, your own business. So when I use the term client, keep in mind it's whoever you're solving a problem for that's outside of you. So we want to understand their needs too, and we're looking to eventually to see how we can overlap our needs and their needs and have our offer match their needs. And in order to do this, and this is where there's a huge opportunity in design thinking, but where there's also a little bit of sometimes cheating, is that people can do a lot of research on the desk, on the computer, with surveys that are sort of let's say, not very in depth. But what you really need to do in this phase is to get out from behind your desk and talk to people. Now, with the lockdown and with some limitations of movement, this is not as easy, but it means you can call somebody or you can schedule a Zoom meeting. And so if you're doing this from the perspective of your business, first you want to talk to your colleagues and your team and make sure that your needs are clear. Then you want to make sure your client's needs are clear, and you want to validate that. So this gathering of evidence is an important part of this phase, and not merely going on assumptions or not merely going on a more distant sort of research. And this is where, when you take the time to do this observation and talk and collect feedback, this is really where you can generate new insights. When I've done other design thinking courses, often what we do is we'll have a company make a hypothesis on the problem. And it's really interesting because people who are expert in their fields and have come back, have many years of experience, they'll come and say, well, we think the problem or the challenge for our client is X. And then we have them do a phone call and say, hey, what do you think if we propose this, or is this your main problem? And even with just one phone call, oftentimes they're surprised. And they might be right, or they might be half right. And so often this simple, even a simple question can really change where their focus is and where their problem is, and it helps them understand their client better. And so this is where we're going to focus on today. But what that's going to bring us to in the next weeks is, next week we'll talk about this ideation phase, which is once we've done the prep work in understanding the client, Then we talk about the brainstorming and coming up with solutions. And this is really fun and there's a lot of energy and we want to generate as many ideas as possible. Solutions that are designed to meet the needs that we've already identified. Then once we get this big list of brainstorming ideas and solutions, then we go to the work to refine them and consider what's feasible. We go back to the needs we've defined for ourselves to help us refine the areas that eventually we're going to go out and do a quick test on, a prototype. And a prototype in this case is not an elaborate, fancy, expensive digital thing. A prototype starts with a sketch on a piece of paper, a brief interaction, a storyboard, and we validate that with our clients, with the people we're testing for. We see if it works and we refine, and then eventually, step by step, we get closer and closer to coming up with an impactful solution. So this is our plan using design thinking. And so now what we're going to do is start to think about where we are today with each of our challenges. But Paula, what would you like to add to this?
I want to add two considerations. The first is that for Simplify, we have indicated these phases like a sequence of phases. First we understand, then we ideate, then refine, and then we act. But we have to consider this is a cycle, because these phases is very quite similar to the understanding, our learning phases. No, you understand what we have around us. We ideate how to solve a problem, how to face and front a situation. Then we refine the solution that we have found, and then we act and react to the situation. So I think that is very, very important that we stay focused today on the first phase that very often, is underestimated. Okay, I think to have understood the problem and I start to ideate the solution. This is not the proper approach. And we can, after to make some consideration about, for instance, the Italian approach to solve the problem instead the other, for instance, the US people. It's interesting also to analyze this different in cultural approach.
Yeah, that's great. And this brings up the fact that, having different perspectives is essential. But here we've got, we have this picture of this floppy just to remind us that we don't want to rely on old methods. I suspect everybody here is of the age where they probably know what this is. But we had in our Italian webinar, we had some students, and I think they knew what it was, but certainly they weren't as familiar with it as some of us who have more experience, let's say, know. So once again, we just went through these phases, and this is what you'll get today is the field of the understanding that part of the canvas, and we're working on this and refining this, and at the end we'll have a complete canvas where you can sort of plug in and work with different ideas, and hopefully the questions on it and the fields on it will stimulate you to identify your challenges and come up with new solutions and eventually test those solutions. So here we are. We're at the understand canvas, and you'll see at the top there's the words in italics: practical, emotional, and what we always want to consider when we're talking about these needs or any of these responses is not just the practical point of view, which is important, of course, and this is generally, it's easier to come up with these, but we want to dig a little bit deeper and go into also emotional and social needs as well, because often what underlies our decision making and drives our actions are these emotional needs. So we want to consider these. Certainly we want to write these down also and evaluate both sides. Paula, I know you like to talk about the two sides of the brain, which is something that's very appropriate here. You're muted.
I'm sorry. Yes, When we use the right and the left part of brain, you know that we use exactly the creativity and the rational part of our brain. The design thinking is a very interesting approach because allow to use both this part of our brain, and they collaborate very strictly to produce new point of view. Literally, we have different point of view if we stay concentrated of the practical and rational part and the emotional and creative part.
Yeah, and so Paula, I don't know if you see in chat, Paula has shared the canvas, but I know some people in chat, it doesn't always work. So if you have a problem receiving it, leave a message in chat in your email and we can send it to you after the webinar, so you have a copy for yourself, okay?
Exactly. I have already sent a short message.
Okay,
if
great.
you have some problem to download it, please let me know and we will send to you by email.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, for some reason my chat is delayed and I see the messages later, but thanks for doing that, Paula. So if you see that we have these fields that are numbered, and if we look at the first field, number 1, we want to talk about your business's needs. So, and you can talk about your business's needs sort of in 4 quadrants. One is the needs that you normally have. And then the other are the needs that are new today in this coronavirus setting. And if you don't have a business, if some people are transitioning, you could talk about your needs and finding new work or switching to your new job or your new business's needs. Your situation, this is your perspective, your personal, your perspective on what the needs are from both practical and emotional. So for instance, if you have a company and you have employees, you're always concerned about paying employees salary, but maybe it's an even bigger challenge in this period because you stopped receiving payments. Of course, you have to pay your suppliers as well. Maybe there's delays in production time because somewhere in the pipeline something got held up. So these are some practical needs. Some emotional needs you might have, we talked about some of these, I think already when we talked about the challenges, the change of pace, going from slow to fast to slow, and how do you manage all that, working at home and being stressed and having to care for your family as well as balance your work. So you want to consider, and you can divide this as sort of consider practical and emotional, ongoing needs, and then needs particularly in this period. Then we want to go on and we want to talk about your client's needs, okay? And this is your best idea on the same thing. Now, probably your clients have a lot of the same needs you do, but then of course they're a different line of business, or your colleagues or your employees, what are their needs? Right now, my main client is an insurance company, and everybody's in smart working now. And so right now they're really having to scramble to manage all these people in different locations. And so some of the practical needs are just exchanging information, getting things done, getting decisions made. How is this happening? And of course, they have the distractions of home and family and an environment that maybe isn't as conducive to working as the office was. On the other hand, some of their challenges are keeping motivation up, keeping energy up when people are in different places. So they're dealing with those needs, and we're talking about how to manage that now, how to manage that engagement, how to manage that motivation while everybody's separate. That's an emotional need, but also how to get decisions made. That's a practical need. So start to think in those terms when you're filling out field number 2. Then once again, you're going to go with your best idea, your belief on why does your client decide to work for you, always considering the practical and emotional parts. So Paula, I know you have a really nice example of why your clients work with you. Maybe you can share that.
Yes, of course. I would like, sorry, also introduce some example related to the other fields, the number one, the number two, the number three, in order to start to have a conversation and interaction with the attendees. For instance, if I have to define my first business need is to close the gap, the digital divide that a lot of small companies have in Italy in front of consultants like me in using, believe me, these tool as Zoom, as Skype. And my business needs is to be able to sell my services also in this situation where I have a big distance between me and my customers. Why? And because the needs of my customer too, remember, are a small company, they need also to understand how to maintain very high the level of motivation and the group motivation of their employees. And in this case, is very important for this company to maintain a very high level of I don't remember in English, sorry, Cristina, coinvolgimento.
Involvement.
Of involvement of these people in the company when they stay home during the lockdown. And why the customer the client work with me. I have two kinds of customer, the small company and the universities. But the reason I think they decide to choose me was the first one from the practical point of view. I'm very precise and in time. When they decide to assign to me a work, I think to be very fast, and I release my job very quickly. And the other reason, the emotional reason, is that I'm an enthusiast, and I think to be able to share the enthusiasm with my colleagues, with my customer, with the student. And that is, I think this is the reason why, from the emotional point of view, they asked me to work with them.
All right, great, thanks, Paula. So what I'd like to do now, what we'd like to do now is talk about what your ideas are for these three fields. The idea is that we'll work a little bit on this, and then what you'll do is you'll go out and gather evidence. This field we have highlighted in red, sorry, field number 4 is then you go and you talk to your clients, or you talk to the people you're designing a solution for, or that you want to design a solution for, and you have a discussion with them. You give them a call, or you have a meeting, or you watch. And when you do that work, you want to ask them what they think, or say, oh, I thought, is this your challenge? Is this right? And then when they answer, you want to dig deeper. You want to ask why a couple times. See if you can get to the base of what their real need. See if you can get to what their real concerns are, what their real challenges are. And after you do that, then you can come back and you can revise your hypothesis. So field 5, you can update after you talk to your colleagues, or after you bring in some different perspective to say, okay, my main challenges were this, but now I see they're this. The same for your clients. And the same for maybe even ask for some feedback as to why they work with you, what your biggest strength is, and make sure that's clear, that you have an understanding from the client's perspective of that, because you're going to use that information to propose some alternative solutions when we get to the ideation phase, the next phase. So now, what about in chat or in voice? Does anybody have questions on these fields, or would anybody like to specifically share something about field number 1 or 2 or 3 right now? It would be great to have some examples of what you're thinking.
Yes. Yeah, I don't mind sharing.
Thanks,
Um,
Michelle.
Unless I'm interrupting, yeah. Well, I think my clients, since I'm a one-person company, and the couple of projects that I was proposed for recently, the projects were stopped. And then recent inquiries, they both came back and said they would prefer to hire somebody internally. So the idea is, A, how do I get them to continue hiring me as an external, since I'm really not looking for a full-time position? And then even when it goes to gathering information, it's not that I can ask these customers directly. I mean, I certainly can talk to headhunters and people familiar with the market, but even getting that feedback might be difficult.
Yeah, that's a good point, because sometimes we're not in the position. Thanks, Michelle, for sharing that. That's a really good point. What do we do when we're not in the position to ask our clients directly for whatever reason, as in Michelle's case? So some alternatives would be, it's still helpful. Now, of course, you can do research online. There's a lot of information, and that can give you even the bulk of what you're looking for. But it would still be helpful to find somebody else to talk to. So somebody in a similar company, a similar situation, that you're not putting pressure on them, but you're asking them what's going on. Why, my clients are taking people internally, but what is that totally a top-down decision that budget doesn't allow for outsourcing, or is there another reason? What are their needs? And what's happening now, people are overwhelmed and scrambling a bit. So maybe you can, is there something you can say, well, they're managing this internally, but what is falling through the cracks? What isn't being done? And perhaps reposition. But yeah, I think that question's important, because it's not always so easy. You don't necessarily have a current relationship with a client that you can call up and say, hey, what do you think? Is this right? So how can you go about and get that information?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say you did just give me a couple of ideas anyway.
And Michelle,
of course, I know several other consultants who are in the same business. I can ask what they're doing.
Yeah. Colleagues, fellow consultants, even in a slightly, this business of, are people hiring internally or outsourcing, is common to consultants in many fields. So to find out what else they're doing. David, were you going to say something?
Marco, maybe?
Marco.
No, I don't.
Michelle, is it clear to you the
Okay.
added value you bring by being an external consultant instead of them using someone in-house? Is this something you've had to use as a selling point before, or is it something you kind of have to formulate now that you're coming up against this?
No, but and also it's part of the situation with the virus, but it was also happening slowly anyway. So it's just a convergence, and now I think it's accelerated because there's a less external budget for these kind
of course. I mean, it seems to me to be a cost cut. It seems to be a cost-cutting move, obviously, to use somebody internally instead of external.
Yeah, but then, I mean, especially in Holland, it's very difficult to fire somebody. So if you have somebody who's external, I'm no risk, you can show me the door at any time. So yeah, maybe I have to sell that a bit more.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, that you're less risk for them. And earlier today, we talked about a case study, slightly different situation, but a low risk that a company developed. So to put yourself forth as one of your strengths is, oh, and by the way, no commitment, no risk, friends with benefits, consultants with benefits, whatever, however you want to say. It's it could be an interesting to push that. Of course they already know that, but as David suggested, to bring that to the forefront of what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Without necessarily advertising yourself as ditch me when you want.
Yes, you still have to do the project, but you could do a project for a few weeks or a few months rather than, a year or two.
Yeah.
And
Thanks.
how about, what other client needs has anybody in the past, or when you've been thinking about your clients or the people you're solving problems, what do you see as, and this is something that, we saw with the earlier sessions, that, as I mentioned, that the emotional aspect, I'm curious as to what people perceive their clients' emotional needs and motivations are, especially in this period. Does anybody have any thoughts on that they could share?
Yes, I'd like to share. When you talk about the emotional side of the experience, you use it's about the experience, no? Especially, I, like Michelle, am a 100% libero professionista character, and many times it's people coming to me who already know me, who are giving me work, and I've felt in the work I've been offered, even in the studio, when I work as an actor, and if I have to go to do a voiceover job, I realize all of these companies that I've worked with for years have many, many new regulations that they have to face right now. And I know this because they have, the jobs I've gotten since we have opened up, the people who have called me have basically been reading, like, the decreto from the Italian government to me on the telephone. So I know they have got a lot of other stuff going on where they are, which has really highlighted for me how to be for them what I think I have been for them in the past, which is why they call me, because it's a pleasant experience to work with me, hopefully. But this has really made me realize how much more flexible I have to be with them, with so many parameters, in not having problems of trying to, find another solution. If I could possibly record this at home on my cell phone, if that's the case, if it's a voice job, but how to be flexible and roll with them, and even understanding the economic side, because I've seen that everybody is in a crunch. So with me, the thing that just keeps coming up is remain calm and flexible and pleasant, because there's a whole bunch of new stuff going on for them. To realize that on your, talking for your empathy box here, just to be really aware that this is tough for everybody. And if they feel that, if their ease in the experience of working for you, I think, is the best publicity and what keeps them coming to you.
Yeah, David, that's a great example, and you touched upon all the points. This idea of empathy, and now in your interactions with your clients, now you've already identified a new need. I know from our past conversations and your past work experience, you always offered, this is sort of a cliched phrase, but value added. They hired you for voice work, but often the work was in English, and you were able to also give them, enrich their content and shape the text in a way that was better. So you added that. You're easy to work with. Now you're making it, when everybody's so stressed and has all of these obligations and things are changing, now you're saying, okay, I'm going to solve that problem for you, but let me do this at home, or I'm going to be more flexible. And this point about being, sometimes, gosh, I get tired and I get frustrated and I don't feel like being nice to people, but sometimes we have to still be nice even when we don't want to, and that often changes the sentiment and the emotion of a high tension situation.
Yeah, well, getting pissed off is an excellent point, Christina, because actually I came to this seeming Zen moment because the first calls I got after the open up were literally calls like, would you do what you always do and be a total pro like you always are, but do it by tomorrow and let us pay you 1/4? So my initial reaction of made me realign my thinking and realize, okay, you can help them out. They're freaked out too. It's not just you, David. And that was a big learning point for me.
Agree.
Yeah, so our emotional, our emotional aspects are different in this period too, probably more stress for so many reasons. And we have to find a way to manage that.
I think people are also looking for ideas. and getting out in front with your ideas is really important. Like people are kind of at wit's end, and they don't have the answers. But if you come at them with answers already pre-baked, they appreciate that a lot.
Yeah.
And they don't even know to ask. I mean, they're just like, ah. And then you come with a couple of solutions already thought out a little bit. You know, you might not normally do this on a non-crisis time to come with, you know, suggestions and you know, full projects and so on. But I find that people are much more receptive now than they used to be for full-on concepts that you come at them with.
Why do you think they're more receptive to that now? What do you?
Because they literally don't know what to do. And they're also, in my work, I'm not a freelancer anymore, but now in my work, they're so overwhelmed. I work for PostNL, and it's literally Christmas every day for shipping.
Mm-hmm.
E-commerce is exploding, so they just don't know what to do. I mean, they have a different kind of crisis, and they don't have time to think. I mean, it's a different kind of crisis. I mean, they have the benefit of too much to do, but they just don't even literally have time to think about it. And maybe all of these clients in their own way don't have the spare brain cells to come up with these ideas. But, you know, you come up with an idea. Oh, and by the way, you know, I'm part of this package that you can, you know, implement me to do this thing that you need, that you don't even know you need.
Yeah. Right, to help them identify, I think that's a very important part of also design thinking. What you talked about there, Fiona, is that they don't always know what they need. So how can our work with design thinking draw out those needs? And I'm sure we've all heard the example, which it's not really Henry Ford said it, but everybody attributes to Henry Ford, is if you asked your customers what they needed, they would have said a faster horse. But that's why we spend so much time going into asking them questions and watching them. So Fiona's already observed that they're overwhelmed and they have so much to do and they don't have time to think. So how can you slip in some, is this, test your hypothesis and ask them, well, what if I propose you this, would this work? Would this solve this situation? And that's really also, I think something very helpful for us, because we don't know we don't know the future, and we don't know what we need, but by asking questions and by observing, we can start to dig away and identify that, and then eventually propose the solutions. But once again, we have to do that work to figure out the needs first.
I have a comment on what Fiona said, because she gave me a thought. Fiona, you said that you came from freelancing into a position, and a permanent position now. And you also said that people often don't even think to ask, or people don't think. I'm realizing how people who are freelancers are maybe, by their experience, kind of design thinkers, because we are always kind of external people coming in from the outside into a new situation, and we've got a kind of overview of it. Whereas, certainly, like with the American educational system, you get your master's degree and your doctorate, and you burrow down in your one little thing. A lot of people who are permanent employees might be very good at what they do, but what they do might be in a really narrow parameter. So it sounds like what you're saying, that this design thinking thing is almost like encouraging everybody to come in kind of as a freelancer. And this moment of change is an opportunity for everybody to have a more global perspective, to kind of pull that camera back from that, close up on you onto what the whole situation is, and to talk and ask questions and propose. I don't know if that's true, Fiona.
Yeah, I think asking the questions are more important than the answers, and listening. That's a really key. When we're in a crisis, we tend to also not listen. Whether the crisis is external or internal, we tend to just, and that doesn't help anyone. So if you're in a situation where a company is in crisis for whatever along that spectrum of crisis they're in, they just plow forward with what they know, and they listen even less than normal. So if you come in, and you say, hey guys, listen, here's something based on my listening to you, here's, what we have, that they appreciate it.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you think is a way that you could gather evidence in this period? If you know, Michelle already noted the challenge of talking to her clients. What are some other ways that you guys might approach this evidence gathering? Any thoughts?
I think there's a little network that you've created even here, right? So there's something about, you can tell that there might be, you know, there's many connections that are already a part of the group that's here. There's also a lot of experience. And I think the piece to always come back to is when you look around you, noticing how much experience that you are surrounded with and surrounded by, and whether it is in the same field or it's a slightly different field. I think what's beautiful about design thinking is it's about taking ideas and innovation from many different areas and many different possibilities, right? And being able to apply those to then your own reality with a slight shift. And the beauty of life, it's like, it's all about what's possible. And I think, Fiona, back to your point, and David, to your point as well, with asking just one question, you can actually shift a conversation, you can create a new conversation, and you create possibility. And so I think just by thinking about, like, what is one question that you can ask of those that you know around you, the experience that you have around you, can be quite powerful.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks, Nicole. That's it's really great to hear everybody's input and experience. It's helpful, and I think it's, you know, as Nicole said, you know, even just this conversation, when and what David mentioned earlier, is when you bring in different perspectives, different viewpoints, because it's so easy to get into a habit and get into a rut, especially when we feel all of this pressure. It can be really hard to get an outside point of view or get some fresh eyes, but that can make all the difference. And as Fiona said, the point about listening, and that is essential, because sometimes we're so excited about our idea that we just want to talk, but we forget to, you know, zip it up and listen. And also, I want to add to that, watch, you know, really observe. And this is where Zoom can be a powerful tool if we can't be in person with people, but you can read people's expression. And the difference between design thinking and what we call the qualitative research, which is this type of in-depth research to ask questions and observe. And it's not doing a survey of asking 100 people. And there's nothing wrong with that. That can provide you with valuable information. But this is a different approach, and this is something that you should add to that. And if somebody says what they're going to do, it isn't always what they will do. And if somebody says they like something, but you see a disconnect between their expression or some confusion, that's an opportunity for you to ask. So it's a mixture of asking and listening and observing and watching what happens. And ideally, if you can do it in their environment and you can really get a sense of the energy, that's the ideal situation. We can't always be in the environment of our clients, but when you do that, that really opens up many new chances to ask about what you see, and to go in, even if you already think you know the answer, to ask the question anyway and see what their response is and the tone of voice and how they respond, because then you start to build a very rich and complex set of answers and information to draw upon.
We have Fiona that unfortunately had another appointment at 7 o'clock, and she had to leave our conference. Thank you so much, Fiona, for your collaboration and for active collaboration to this.
I really like this group. Really nice. Thank you so much for sharing all this. It's great.
Thank you. Thank you. And I hope see you in the next appointment for the ideate phase. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks.
Thank you.
Good luck, everybody.
Thanks. So we've got just a couple minutes left. Oh, Mike's with us.
Yes, Mike is right from.
Hi, sorry I joined late.
No problem, Mike.
Hi, guys.
We are happy to see you.
Nice to see you, Mike. So we have a few minutes left. do you think that this is something you'll be able to work on these fields 1 through 3, and then go out and see what you can do to gather the evidence? And then what we'd like to do, and what we did with the Italian group, is for the second session, if you finish these canvases or do as much work as you can, send them to us. And if you have any questions in the meantime, drop us a line, and we'll talk about your experience in these canvases and what you found out. And then we'll build upon that for the next phase, the ideation phase, which is the fun phase about proposing solutions.
Yes.
Okay. Any
if you have some question about, or if you want to say, to give us some, let me say, first feedback about this organization, about the content that we have organized for you in this first section, because for us it's very important to understand if the, let me say, the mood of the conversation, the structure of the document that we have shared with you is interesting and useful for you. So if you have something to...
Nope. A quiet group now. Everybody's hungry, maybe for dinner, or Mike for lunch, maybe.
Yeah.
It's very useful and very interesting. Thank you for organizing.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thanks for your feedback. We'll send the copy and the links for the video if you want to review. And like I said, please send us any questions you have. And I really thank everybody for joining us and for interacting.
Yes,
Super.
exactly.
Thank you both so much.
Thank you so much for your time and sharing your knowledge.
Yeah.
You're welcome, and thanks to you. Okay. See you to the next. I will send to you all the information after, I think tomorrow morning, you will receive all the information that we have shared today.
Excellent.
Awesome.
Ciao, ciao.
Thanks.
Okay.
Have a good one.
Ciao, ciao. Grazie.
Bye.
Grazie.
Bye.
Ciao.
Ciao.